Well, hello, everyone. I'm so glad we could be together on this most important historical day. The problem with it is, I don't think people know how historical it is. They don't know what's going on. If it were me, I'd say call everybody or text everybody or send a message, Twitter somebody, whatever, and say, hear this message today. We're going to talk about something that's going to help us understand what's going on in the world. But the problem is, you can't get anybody's attention today. You can't get even your relatives or friends. You can't sit down with your friends or relatives or people you love even and say, listen, I want to explain to you what's going on in the world today and how we need to view it and how we need to prepare for it. And you, in my opinion, you can't just listen to the television. You can't listen to our president who will be speaking today. You can't listen to the politicians. What the best, in my opinion, the best thing you can do is look at the game plan of history. What's happening is there's a game plan being followed that's being followed before that was followed before. Okay. And so right now we have the day I'm talking about, of course, is um, the Russians have entered, Ukraine, and but it's like it's just going to be so subtle. It's so easing in that people will soften to it. It'll say it's not that bad, but you don't know the big game plan. And one of the things we can look at is exactly how it happened in World War II with the Nazi army and Hitler and how they eased into it. And when I heard the speech of Vladimir Putin, I recognized immediately the game plan. And maybe it's because my age or I've been around my Kathy's parents, my parents fought in World War II. So we heard about it, we knew a little bit about it, and then I've studied it just out of interest through the years, understanding how he worked his way in and softened people's hearts to think, okay, that's all he's going to do. He just wants a little bit. But when you listen to that speech, I think it was yesterday or day before, but his speech, you listened, it was a classic example of Hitler's speech to the German people saying, we were treated wrong. It's time for us to go back and get what's ours. And that appeals to people. Say, yes, we need to go take what's ours. And so he appealed back to the with the falling of the Soviet Union and when it fell apart and they lost it and it wasn't right. We were mistreated. We need to go back and take what is ours. It was ours then. It needs to be ours now. And it begins to appeal to the hearts of the people that, yes, we've been treated wrong. And so that's what Hitler did with the German people. And a lot of people, they don't understand, well, how could it be that the German people could be blinded, or how could they do this? And a lot of things they did know, some things they didn't know. He appealed to, we've been treated wrong from World War One. They lost World War One, and they fined them, and they took this away and they took that away, and he came back and said, this isn't right. They took too much away. They took what was ours. We've been mistreated. It's time to be Germans again. It's time to be Germany again. It's time to be us again. We're great people. We're the major people, and look how we've been treated. And they drilled it and drilled it and drilled it. And then I heard that speech the other day, and there it was. There he was saying, hey, the Soviet Union, when it was dismantled, we've been done wrong. We need to go take what's ours. So now as he's easing into these territories, he's saying, look, we're just taking what's ours. We're not invading. We're just going in and really rescuing, really getting these people out of what they were in. We're taking what's ours, but we're really rescuers. We're going and rescuing them, taking them in. And so that's kind of how it's going to be. And so a lot of people are going to go say, well, okay, well, it's just a couple of pieces of land, and they're not that big. They're right on the border of Russia. And so history says that the world will be softened up. They'll try to do, different, like you're talking sanctions and like that. But good to see Valerie and Darren. Good to see you and have you together with us, and all those else people with us. Um, and it softens it up. And so the American people, I don't think, realize that this probably, I'm not being prophetically as much as probably following the game plan that I think he's following, uh, will escalate this, that the plan is not to just have these two little pieces of land. You don't put 150,000, 200,000 troops or whatever on a border of a country just so you can take these two, which hasn't cost very much. They're rolling in now. And so there's a lot of big talk, but I don't think our people, the Christian people, the churches are going to say much. They're not going to say much. They're not going to do much. The problem is history tells us that this isn't where they're going to stop. It's just the beginning. And we're very likely, if he follows the game plan, that emotion, this is more like he's a dictator with the emotions, and he's stirring up the emotions of people in Russia saying, we've been mistreated. We've been robbed. That's a lot different than saying, oh, let's go get some oil, or we could do better prosperity. And they could. They have a lot of problems. But when you when you go after the emotions of the people, and you do it in speeches, and he's in the news a lot, and he's going to be more in the news, he's going to become a major speaker and player on the world scene, then it stirs up the Russian people and says, we just got to go get what's ours. And that's what happened in World War II. They went and said, let's go get what's ours. So they began to invade, and they would say, we're just going to get this one, and then we'll just get that one, until finally it became obvious that was not what's happening, that they were going to go after more and more. But in the meantime, there were politicians, leaders that were convinced that Adolf Hitler wanted peace. He just wanted a little bit. They're hurt. They were taken advantage of. They were asked for too much after the defeat of World War I. So, we'll just appease them. He just wants a little bit, and then we won't have a war. It won't go any farther. Now you read back on it, and you read his game plan, and you realize he had every intention of going farther and farther and building an empire. And I think Putin is as he's speaking about the mistakes of the early Soviet Union, and he mentioned some of their past leaders and how they let down the Soviet Union, they let down the Russian people, and now he's here to take it back, to take it back, to take it back. And once you realize that, then you think there's a good chance this could be the beginning of something that could get out of hand in a hurry. And I think here in America, we think, well, it's never going to go past anything. And also, and the other game plan I think is really interesting. In both World War I and World War II, both the United States stepped back and says, we don't want to have anything to do with it. This isn't our war, until it finally got to be where it had to be our war due to circumstances. And our troops went over there, the famous song Over There. And so they went over and helped them win. And then World War II, of course, we had no intention of entering the war at all until Japan attacked us. And then Adolf Hitler made a terrible mistake, but I don't see the hand of God in all this. Look at it, but it was a mistake on the enemy's part, and he declared war on the United States, which he didn't have to do, but he did. That pulled us in the European campaign, and their history from there. But through all of it, and in the Bible you can see it too, where God used Israel's enemies, anti-God people, pagan people, to manipulate the world, to set it up for his own victories and his own will to be done. Okay. But, and so as much as we see this happening, we maybe have to really look and see, what is the long-term plan of God in this? And if God's in it, if God's moving these pieces, then we need to set our hearts to be ready for it, and to then be, what frustrates me the most is want to be a voice, and not just me, but others like me and you. We all need to be a voice. See, we do not want to be like the clueless people in Noah's day, where they were clueless. They had no idea the flood was coming till the flood was there, even though there was the voice of Moses, of Noah, saying, preaching righteousness and saying, there's a flood coming. There's a flood coming, and the world's going to change. I started, ever since we came to Kansas City, I've told people that we are in a transitional world, and the world is going to change, and the governments are going to change. And I said, you can see things leading up to events that'll eventually happen to bring about a war. And I've had, even before we moved to Kansas City, I was in several places in the world, and during worship and praise, and then right before the preaching, there were several visions like neon signs and then movement in the sky where I saw swords clash and I saw lightnings flash and then just a sign that says war. Now, when you try to tell people that, uh, hi, Eleanor and Kenda, hello, glad you're with us. And when you try to tell people that and it's 20 years in advance, 20 years ago, it's really tough. And Moses had lots of time to tell, how many years did he wait? And it's tough to get people's attention. But now it's like a stupor comes over. And we try to say, hey, we're on the verge of something that could be very big, and we need to be the voice. We don't need to be the voice of fear. We need to be the voice of God. And God is not fear. There's no fear in this, but we're the voice of God saying, prepare our hearts. And it's very possible. I don't want to speculate, but it's very possible that we are actually being set up for the return of Jesus Christ, set up for it. Now, why would I say that? And when there was World War One, World War Two, I mean, somebody could have said it then. In fact, obviously, when Hitler began to take over Europe and they saw the camps and the Holocaust, and they called him the Antichrist, and it's the end of the world and all that. But why was that not possible? Well, because there was no Israel. And so, if you read the Bible in Romans, then it says, Israel's going to come back. They're going to be restored. And we're looking for salvation and just all kinds of things that there's some promises that have been out there geared towards Israel that they couldn't have if you don't have an Israel. You can't have a promise fulfilled in Israel if there's no Israel. Well, then God was moving all the pieces until out of that war came, oh, hi, Heather. Hi, Donald. Out of that war came Israel. Was it costly? Yeah, it was Jacob's trouble. It was a hard birth. It was a difficult birth that was not pretty. Okay. But still, God brought a birth of a nation out of it. And now that we have that Israel, now we can look to fulfilling more promises, more manipulation, more movement through the kingdom of God, the power of God with Israel, with the world, with the church, and say this could be the setup to bring Jesus back. I don't think Jesus is going to return without an Israel. So now that we have an Israel, now we can set up what needs to happen before he can actually return. And I would love that to return. And we want to hasten his return. But these, to me, are all pieces of the true end time where the church stands up and begins to be what the church needs to be and be a voice. So this is the frustration with me. As I spoke in our church on Sunday, I said, we need to have a message. And I said, we got a clear message, and it's short and to the point. Our God is a supply. So my God shall supply your every need. And you start just by believing that and start living it as that God is a supply. Don't forget, God is a supply, and he will supply our nation. He'll supply our church. He'll supply our home. Whatever our need is, we've got to start looking to God as a supply line, not to our nation, not to our military, not to wise politicians or whatever. We've got to look to our God, and then we've got to announce to the nation that is basically pagan now. I had someone tell me the other day, he said, Putin is not communist, he's a dictator, but the United States is not a godly nation either. We're not the godly nation we once were, if we were. We're not a godly nation now. And that's the problem. If we start believing that in our present condition, we can call upon the name of the Lord and ask, this might be too much for you, and ask God if it would become threatening. Let's say Russia or China, which they've been talking, they get together and a war breaks out against us, and we go, well, but we're a Christian nation. We're going to beat them. And God says, really? Are you really a Christian nation? And that's the problem that Israel had by being occupied by Rome. They said, God, we're your people and we're Abraham's children, and go get Rome. And God said, listen, you're no better. You're no better. In fact, he said, your father's the devil and their father's the devil. Now you want me to destroy them and bless you and save you. So God did send a Savior named Jesus Christ, and he rose up a people among the Jews, but it was a remnant. A remnant's just a piece. Wasn't the whole country. And Israel then was attacked and Jerusalem was destroyed. Wasn't a pretty picture, but a remnant came out of it. And we've got that, I believe, that remnant within Israel right now. There's still that remnant. And I'm not just talking about Jewish believers who believe in the Messiah Jesus. I'm talking about a remnant of people are just there. And even if they're not in the center right now of attention of God, they could be being set up to be the remnant people of God, to have circumstances. Just imagine it. Circumstances break out in the world that we don't want to see. We're like, oh no, we don't want to see this bad stuff happen, and war break out, and we're scared, and people are frightened, and there's shortages, and we have to start, rationing gas, and we can't buy all the junk food we want, and we think, oh no. But then those things trigger people in Israel. Trigger Jewish people in Israel to start rising up and calling upon the name of the Lord, who basically are considered secular Jews. Don't go to synagogue, don't go to temple, don't really pray that much, sort of believe in God, but they start rising up, and people start calling into Israel on the name of the Lord, saying, God, save us now, come save us now. And then people across America start being Christians again. Christians who think they're Christians start being Christians again. Well, it'd be a high price. We wished it wouldn't happen that way, but it could happen that way. So we need a voice to tell people this is the plan. If it breaks out, if it looks bad, then and it's scary, and it looks like shortages and war is escalating, which I'm not saying it will, but I'm saying if you follow the game plan of other wars and other dictators, this is the way it happened. Start out slow, move in easy, let everybody put their guard down, and then you go for more. And it's possible more could happen tomorrow, but it's probably going to ease in a little bit, and then governments are going to let down. They'll do sanctions, and they'll make threats and stuff, and then it'll ease more. So we'll let down our guard, and then it'll ease more. And so eventually, though, it went more and more and more until we finally all of us were threatened in the world, and something had to be done, and we were in a world war. This world war would be different, obviously, with nuclear powers and people willing to use them. It could be quite a time in history. But remember, this is not the end. Jesus is going to bring the end through the preaching of the word. It's not going to be done by wars or rumors of war, but Jesus said the end will come. When the gospel of the kingdom is preached to all the world, then the end will come. So the end comes by preachers speaking out. So we need people like you just to look for those opportunities to say, and maybe we're early. Sometimes I'm an early bird preacher. I'm a little ahead of time. Maybe we're early. Maybe it needs to get a little worse. Maybe it needs to get a little more advanced before people will believe you or believe me. But we need to get the message in us to say, don't lose hope. Fear not. You need to make God your supply, and you need to get it in your heart that we're going to start praying and believing until we know God is going to bless the United States of America. And in God we trust. And we're going to realize that this is God's move, if necessary. This is God's move to get us in position for possibly the greatest revival, not the biggest, but the greatest revival on the face of the earth, including Israel, until Jesus returns again to his people. How's that sound? So watch with me. I'm going to listen to the news. I'll listen to our president. I'll listen to Putin speak. But the game plan is, I think he's read and knows history, and he's following the history book. So you can plan on that. You can just see how this evolved and realize he's basically following the appeasement, and do a little bit at a time, and then people will let it go. And then a little bit at a time. But my biggest point is, I hear in his voice and I hear in his speech that we've been done wrong. We as the Russian people need to take back what's ours and what's been taken from us. And we've been cheated. That is a strong emotional message that has worked in other times. And that's the biggest thing I hear, rather than maybe he's going after oil or whatever. So I see him repeating that, and I see that gets into people. And so it's an emotional, almost a religious type message that gets into people. Said, yeah, we need to go take back what's ours. And then when you see they have shortages, and they have short of food, and they have short of oil or whatever they're short of, and they have problems, and they go, well, yeah, let's go take what's ours, and then we won't be suffering so much. Very strong. It's happened before. So that's what I'm watching is he following the game plan of other wars and other dictators? And that gives me a clue what to watch for and helps me get ready with a message for the world, for our nation, from our church, and for our families, that God will be your supply, but fear not, for the God of Jacob is still our refuge, and we want to get back the United States of America that finally arises and says, in God we trust. Thanks for listening to me today. Let's continue to pray.